What's up, metal and heavy music fans? These are my favorite death metal albums of 2022 so far. Alright, starting in no particular order, we have Malthusian and Suffering Hour with Time's Withering Shadow. So I don't cover a ton of split releases, but when it's between two of your favorite underground blackened death metal bands, you take notice. Both of them have quietly become known for some time for the darkest, most demented music in the genre, in a similar vein as Portal, Deathspell Omega, and Abyssal. Malthusian's side is filled with slimy, slithering black death and doom, always knowing when to change the pace to keep things interesting, riffs coiling and contorting their way through the listener's psyche, often leaving you feeling deeply violated, while Suffering Hour takes this opportunity to add a few new tricks to their repertoire. In addition to their usual haunting atmosphere, they also incorporate harmonica, Spanish guitar, banjo, and plenty of reverb on the electric guitar to craft what sounds like the soundtrack to the most harrowing spaghetti western never made. Miserable music from two of the most underrated and interesting bands in the underground right now. Next up is Sensory Amusia with Breed Death. Inspired by the likes of Dying Fetus, Misery Index, Aborted, and Cryptopsy, this Australian death metal band absolutely ripped me apart with their 2020 EP, Bereavement. Breed Death delivers on that same promise of brutality in its first 58 seconds with the opening track, Birth Through Violence. The riffs are a devastating amalgam of death, thrash, groove, and grind, resulting in songs that manage to be crushing and catchy at the same time. And as if that wasn't enough already, tracks like Bind, Torture, Kill, and Vermin manage to add some impressive layers of atmosphere without overcomplicating things. That's not even to mention the impressively dynamic vocal performance ranging from totally understandable death bellows and blackened snarls to completely indecipherable gutturals. And once more, Sensory Amusia is one of those bands that recognizes less is more in the genre, keeping the runtime to a very lean and mean 32 minutes. Punishing stuff indeed. Then we have Aeviterne with the Ailing Facade. This is a death metal project that was recommended to me by a fan in the comments and is the perfect example of how this community is a very two-way street when it comes to awesome and often overlooked new music. Also a popular choice when I asked you all what your favorite death metal album is of 2022 so far. I was already sold at the top with the viciousness of the vocals, but add Artificial Brain and Fawn Limbs guitarist Samuel Smith and some truly thunderous drumming engineered and mastered by Colin Marston of Gorguts, Krallis, and Behold the Arctopus fame, and I was hooked for the long haul.
You son of a bitch, I'm in.
The band lists both the technicality of immolation and psychedelic menace of Godflesh as influences, the latter especially coming through on the syncopation and eerie atmosphere of tracks like The Gaunt Sky and Stilled the Hollow's Sway. The entire album is the perfect balance of battering brutality and haunting atmosphere, right down to the cover art. It's like a nightmare brought to life. While I missed hearing this in time for my Best of March list, I'm so glad it was brought to my attention so that I could further spread one of the most dominating records of the year. On a completely different note, we have Amorphis with Halo. So in my Amorphis tier list, I was slightly down on this album in comparison to some of their other modern output, but it has definitely grown on me more and more since then. It has a very strong sense of consistency that makes for a great front to back listen, but also some really stunning set pieces, including some awesome sitar sound on the likes of A New Land and On the Dark Waters. Also, great balance of bellowing death growls and soaring clean vocals, lots of memorable piano and synth work woven into already impressive, thought-provoking compositions, and tons of atmosphere with a lot of folky energy, especially on the bouncy and exotic sounding When the Gods Come and War. And honestly, in terms of this element, it is only second to another album on this list we'll be getting to at the end. Next up, we have another underground pick in Man-Eating Orchid, Hive Mind. If Gorgut's later career Death and Voivod had an angry little baby, its birthing cries would sound a lot like Man-Eating Orchid. This India-based band leans heavily into math, tech, and prog to a degree that is probably somehow hazardous to your brain. Every track seems more like an endurance test of your mental dexterity, and I know that Tool and Meshuggah fans out there think that they're on another plane, but as much as I love those bands, this is that real galaxy brain shit. I get a lot of band submissions these days, more than I have time to even cover in my Best of Bandcamp segments, but sometimes I press play on something and just immediately know it's special. And not only did I have that experience with Hive Mind, but so did everyone in the Discord when I dropped the link. So spread the word, the only thing that this band seems to be in need of at this point is exposure. Then we have Allegaeon with Damnum. Now, if you're looking for great progressive death metal this year, look no further than this album. Damnum is a huge step up from the previous album with highly engaging songwriting, enthralling riffage, and incredible dynamics on tracks like Into Embers. That's not to mention the little detours into other styles like the Spanish guitar section of To Carry My Grief Through Torpor and Silence, some absolutely stunning piano on Blight, and Called Home feels like a straight up love letter to Opeth. Speaking of which, I'm also in love with the clean vocals, which sound better than ever, and even the death growls, which I previously called one note in comparison to the complex instrumentation, sound like they are taking more dynamic strides, as with the almost Archspire sounding ones on the Dopamine Void. Quite frankly, this may be one of their most impressive albums to date. Then we have Venom Prison with Erebos. So the direction of this album is such that some might argue whether it even qualifies for this list, but it's precisely that stylistic diversity that makes it my favorite Venom Prison album to date. Songs seem to pull on everything from Arch Enemy and Lamb of God riffs to Between the Buried and Me solos and deathcore breakdowns to the complete curveball that is Pain of Oases. Fan response has certainly been split regarding these melodic elements and clean singing, but the changes feel in favor of something far more interesting and memorable in the end. If you ask me, an album that sticks with you trumps sheer heaviness every time. In the end, I don't care how loud and abrasive your music is, I just need it to seep in and make me feel something, and Erebos does that with flying colors. Then we have Artificial Brain with Artificial Brain. This New York band combines dissonance, brutality, and progressive song structures in a way that gives even Gorguts a run for their money. And all the while crafting compositions that are both challenging and highly rewarding the more that you listen. Tracks like A Lofty Grave and Celestial Cyst are the perfect examples, traversing blast beats, pace changes, and gurgly death growls while still maintaining a sense of earworm hooks and memorable melodies. Now make no mistake, this is still not for the average normie death metal fan. I'd argue it's a touch more accessible than Gorguts, but if your idea of difficult to listen to is still Cannibal Corpse, I might suggest inoculating yourself first with the likes of Ulcerate and Portal.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet.
Either way, this is another fine entry into the Artificial Brain catalog and a must-listen in 2022. Then there's Bloodhunter with Knowledge Was the Price. Life is a bad mistake that makes you think that If you find yourself missing the Angela Gossow golden era of Arch Enemy, then Bloodhunter is the band you didn't know you needed. Diva Satanica, also of Nervosa fame, possesses both the viciousness and showmanship of those glory days, and alongside impressive melodic death metal musicianship that goes toe-to-toe with classics like Wages of Sin and Doomsday Machine. Not to mention a cosign from Therion's Rosalia Serum in The Forsaken Idol, in addition to more infectious headbanging. Admittedly, some trimming would make the album a bit more focused, but really there's not a bad track here, including standouts like Sharpened Tongues spitting venom inside, Knowledge Was the Price, and A Twist of Fate to Come. If you're looking for great melodic death metal with shredding on par with the classics, be sure to give this one a listen. Then there's Descent with Order of Chaos. Descent is another Australian death metal band, this one very much HM2 driven, featuring members of Snorlax, Resin Tomb, and much more, and also mixed by none other than Converge's Kurt Ballou.
You had me at HM2.
This is some ripping, tearing, downright grindy death metal that should appeal to fans of both old school death metal as well as more metallic hardcore inspired projects like End, entombed core of the finest variety. Along with some pretty killer atmosphere when they slow things down for tracks like Fester, and aside from the absolutely pulverizing torrent of distortion, expect a pretty dynamic vocal performance with guttural lows to throat-shredding highs. Seriously, the parts where they layer them should have some sort of warning label. Perfect for those just looking for that pure heavy. And then finally, we have Septicflesh with Modern Primitive. I waited a long time for this album, and thankfully it did not disappoint one bit. I would even go so far as to say that this album contains some of the band's best orchestrations to date, with Coming Storm's raging whirlwind of woodwinds and screeching bows, or a Desert Throne going full-on Lawrence of Arabia soundtrack. Speaking of which, I'm loving the regional influences in addition to the usual bombastic explosions of brass and haunting strings, and then of course all of this contrasted with the big lumbering riffs and inhumanly deep growls of tracks like Hierophant and Neuromancer. After finding myself a bit disappointed by Codex Omega, this one was well worth the 5-year wait. It's 39 minutes of some of the band's best work without an ounce of filler. Easily the most grand sounding album in terms of scope this year so far. Y'all check out this playlist for more of my favorite albums of 2022, or this playlist for a lot more death metal related videos, and let me know down in the comments what's your favorite death metal album of the year so far. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.